Tough times are coming, whether you like it or not. Unfortunately, things are going to get a little tougher. Prices are going up. It's already happening.
We are going to see food shortages, empty shelves, job losses, and even higher inflation with all these tariffs. It's going to be pretty crazy.
What if the next national emergency doesn't come with sirens, but with an empty shelf where your food used to be? And what if the items you once overlooked, the ones you barely noticed sitting on the bottom shelf, suddenly became the difference between comfort and crisis? You don't need a war or a massive natural disaster. All it takes is inflation, supply cuts, and a system too stretched to notice when things begin slipping through the cracks. Right now, in towns across America, people are reaching for the same basic products they've always relied on, just to realize they're gone, locked up, or priced beyond reach. We're not talking about gold or luxury. We're talking about bottled water, toilet paper, a gallon of milk. Is it the quiet fall down is already in motion and the first to go are the cheapest things? This is the Downturn Report, when the truth gets personal. In this video, we'll uncover 15 dirt cheap items that could become priceless in the days ahead. These are the things smart preppers are already grabbing, not out of panic, but because they've seen what's coming. And if you thought a bottle of water would always be there, think again. Number 1. Bottled water. When even a bottle of water costs more than what you have left in your wallet, what does that say about the country we're living in? There was a time when bottled water barely crossed your mind. It sat in rows at the checkout, cheaper than a candy bar, always within reach. But now, in 2025, that quiet convenience is slipping away. In many stores across the US, signs quietly appear limit 2 per customer. In others, the shelves are simply empty. According to data from the St. Louis Fed, the producer price index for bottled water spiked to a decade high in March. A 16.9 oz bottle now averages over $1.50 in several states, up nearly 20% since January. But the price tag is just the surface. Historic droughts in Arizona, Nevada, and California have pushed reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell to record lows, forcing major bottlers to reduce output or close altogether. Meanwhile, fuel costs and packaging expenses have soared, and new groundwater restrictions are tightening supply further. In many neighborhoods, tap water is no longer an option. Seniors fear contaminants in old pipes. Children need clean water for formula. Workers exposed to the summer sun can't wait days for online shipments. And for families without filtration systems, bottled water is not a luxury. It's survival. There are towns now where people skip treats to afford a pack of water, where drinking becomes a calculation, not a reflex. The very idea that hydration must now be measured and budgeted, one sip at a time, feels like a quiet breaking point. Someone once said water should never be something you have to think twice about. But that was before plastic bottles carried warning labels instead of price tags. Before basic health came with fine print. Now, the shelves are going bare. And for millions who once thought clean water was the one thing that could never disappear, this might be the moment they realize how much they took it for granted. Number 2, diapers. What kind of country forces parents to count diapers like money, worried that running out might put a child at risk, once just another item on the grocery list? A clean diaper has quietly become a financial burden for millions of American families. In 2025, a pack of Pampers size 2 now costs close to $35 in many states. That's before taxes, before wipes, before gas to get to the store. And for nearly half of all households with infants, according to the National Diaper Bank Network, the struggle is no longer occasional. It's daily. When food stamps like SNAP and WIC refuse to cover diapers because they aren't food, struggling parents are left with impossible choices. Some reuse disposable diapers. Others resort to folded towels or cut up old t-shirts, hoping to avoid infection. And without a fresh supply, daycare centers often turn children away. No daycare means no work. No work means no rent, no heat, no groceries. The domino effect begins with a diaper. This isn't a small problem. It's not a fringe issue. It's a quiet emergency happening in living rooms, laundromats, and backseats of cars, immigrant families, single mothers, those working under-the-table jobs. They're not on the evening news, but they're the ones counting diapers like dollar bills. When a system refuses to provide support for the most basic needs of a newborn, it sends a clear message raising a child is a private burden, even if the cost threatens the whole family's survival. A mother in suburban Pennsylvania recently admitted to counting how many diapers she had left just to be sure. Every morning begins with the same question, can we make it through the day? She doesn't dream of luxuries. She just wants to avoid a rash, a fever, a tearful baby in the middle of the night, with nothing clean to offer. And yet here we are, with the price of diapers creeping up, and no public assistance to help. A generation of babies is being raised under the weight of quiet arithmetic. How many diapers? How many dollars? How many sacrifices? If a nation forces its parents to choose between diapers and electricity, the question becomes too painful to ignore. What exactly are we asking people to build their families on? Number 3, cooking oil. When grocery stores start locking up bottles of cooking oil like they're jewelry, you know something deeper is breaking. Not long ago, cooking oil was a background item, shoved to the bottom shelf, often on discount, rarely noticed. But in 2025, that quiet bottle has become a battlefield. In some supermarkets, you'll now find canola oil under plastic locks, behind security tags, not because of panic, but because theft is rising, because supply is falling. Because basic cooking oil is starting to slip out of reach. According to the USDA's April report, U.S. soybean oil reserves have dropped to just 1.45 billion pounds, the lowest in a decade. Over 1.325 billion pounds are now being rerouted to biofuel production, draining what's left for everyday families. On top of that, 96% of America's canola oil is imported from Canada, now subject to a 25% import tax. Small restaurants are already pulling fried dishes off the menu. And diners, they're paying extra. Not for truffles or lobster, but for oil. Why is this happening? Because cooking oil sits at the intersection of farming, fuel, and freight. One bad harvest, one policy shift, one disrupted shipping route, and suddenly, the bottle in your kitchen becomes a rare commodity. You can't manufacture it in a lab. You can't store it forever. And once it's gone, it's not easy to replace. And what then? Millions of working families use oil to stretch meals. Without oil, even the most basic food becomes harder to prepare. Seniors lose access to hot meals. School cafeterias start cutting portions. Retirement homes swap stews for cold sandwiches. One spoonful of oil may not seem like much, but for those living paycheck to paycheck, it's what keeps dinner warm, kids full, and dignity intact. In some neighborhoods, people are rationing oil like it's medicine, because in a crisis, it is. There's a quiet desperation in kitchens where the flame is strong, but the pan stays dry. And if a $2 bottle of oil must now be limited, what's left of the warmth we once called home? Number 4, milk and dairy products. When a carton of milk becomes something you have to think twice about, the crisis is already at your breakfast table. Milk was once the quiet constant of American life, a gallon in every fridge, a splash in your coffee, a bowl of cereal before school. But today, even this symbol of stability is no longer immune to inflation. The average price of whole milk hit $4.05 per gallon. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, butter, cheese, and yogurt have followed suit. What is the reason behind this labor shortages at farms? Skyrocketing costs of livestock feed and refrigerated transport, and a surge in U.S. milk exports, which is draining supplies from domestic shelves. Small dairies, unable to compete, are shuttering quietly while larger producers prioritize higher-paying foreign markets. And with no targeted support policies for small dairy farmers, the gap keeps widening, but the data only tells part of the story. The rest lies in quiet kitchen decisions. Elderly people with osteoporosis are skipping milk to afford medicine. Kids eat dry cereal because there's no milk left. Mothers in rural towns cross milk off the grocery list, not because they want to, but because something has to go. Dairy is more than a drink. It's woven into the emotional fabric of daily life. A warm cup before bed, cheese slices in school lunches, coffee that tastes like comfort. Without it, mornings feel colder. Routines feel disrupted. And for many, Something as small as a missing milk carton becomes a loud reminder of everything else slipping away. No headlines scream it. No alarm sound. But in nursing homes, in family kitchens, in tiny fridges of retirees, the shift is already here. If milk is now a luxury, then what's left that still feels like home? Number 5, toilet paper. When toilet paper gets security tags, stability is slipping through the cracks of the everyday. There was a time when toilet paper was bought in bulk, 12 rolls, 24 rolls, shoved under the sink and forgotten until needed. But now, in 2025, that quiet certainty has vanished. In several states, customers are limited to just 2 rolls per trip. Some retailers have gone as far as placing security tags on family-sized packs, like it's cash, not just must-have hygiene. According to the April 2025 Consumer Price Index, toilet paper prices have risen by nearly 30% compared to the same time last year. Why Canada, which supplies the majority of softwood pulp to the US, is now embroiled in a trade standoff. New import tariffs on raw pulp have thrown supply chains into chaos. Domestic mills cannot fill the gap, and paper companies like Kimberly-Clark are reporting an expected $300 million increase in production costs this year alone. But beyond economics lies something more intimate. Seniors living alone now skip a second trip to the store. Not because they want to, but because they've already hit their quota. Families with young children are rationing sheets. Some have begun switching to cloth, bidets, or whatever they can find. In nursing homes, staff are starting to count rolls per patient. At schools, hospitals, shelters, the places most in need, supplies are thinning out. This is no longer just about inconvenience. When a basic hygiene product becomes precious, the line between discomfort and indignity begins to blur. There may not be long lines like in 2020, but the silent, empty shelves, the second glances at price tags, the quiet shame of having to choose, those speak even louder. At a supermarket in Indiana, surveillance cameras now point directly at the paper aisle, not the electronics, not the wine. The paper. Toilet paper has become something to protect, to limit, to regulate. And when that happens, the question isn't just what's going on with supply, it's what's going on with us. Because if even your right to feel clean must be earned or guarded, what remains of the decency we thought would always be there? Number 6, eggs. What if the cheapest source of protein for millions suddenly became the hardest to afford for generations? Eggs were the fallback plan. Affordable, filling, simple. But in early 2025, that quiet certainty cracked. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average price for a dozen large eggs jumped to $6.23 in February, an 84% increase from just a year ago. Behind that number lies a perfect storm. Outbreaks of avian flu have wiped out over 166 million birds since 2022, with poultry farms across the country struggling to recover. Feed prices are up, labor is short, transportation is expensive, and in states like California and Colorado, laws requiring cage-free farming have pushed production costs even higher. For millions of American families, it's a story about survival. Eggs used to be the most reliable way to feed a child protein when meat was too costly. Now, even a simple breakfast feels out of reach. School cafeterias are quietly removing eggs from menus, soup kitchens are switching to starches, elderly people who relied on eggs as their main source of nutrition are suddenly facing hard choices at checkout. In one apartment building in the Midwest, a mother now splits one egg between 2 children. Pancake mornings have stopped, birthday cakes are being scaled back or skipped, and the egg sandwiches that once marked a comforting routine now mark a decision to spend or to save. We are watching, silently, as the most ordinary foods become symbols of pressure and loss. There's no alarm bell, no protest, just the sound of someone putting a carton back on the shelf. And in that quiet moment, something changes. A symbol of nourishment and care becomes something to budget, something to hesitate over. If a single egg now makes you stop and think, then maybe the crisis is already no longer far from us. Number 7, canned foods. What if the shelves for storm prep are empty, even when the skies are clear in past years? Americans rushed to stock up on canned goods only when hurricanes or snowstorms loomed. But now, many shelves are bare even on quiet afternoons. It's panic buying. It's slowly disappearing. According to USDA data, U.S. production of canned vegetables dropped over 6% in 2024. Nielsen reported price hikes of 12-15% across all canned categories. The cause is erratic weather, higher costs of aluminum, skyrocketing transportation, and a wave of small factory closures that never recovered after the pandemic. But this isn't just about rising prices. It's about losing a quiet kind of safety net. For low-income families, seniors living alone, and those on food stamps, canned food was survival in a tin. A can of beans could stretch a meal for a week. A can of soup meant not going hungry on days too sick or tired to cook. Food banks and charities used to distribute crates of canned goods. Now, their supplies are thinning, and the recipients most dependent are the first to feel the squeeze. When canned foods vanish, so does a layer of silent insurance. It was the one thing many could count on, that no matter what came tomorrow, there would be something to eat tonight. But with inflation compounding, aluminum becoming harder to source, and domestic plants shuttering quietly, that safety net is breaking thread by thread. A food pantry in Ohio recently reported they could only offer half the canned inventory they provided last year. Imagine walking into a store and seeing no canned tuna, no beans, no ready-to-heat chili. On a sunny day, in a normal week, no emergency, just absence. And in that absence lies a quiet alarm if the most basic form of backup food is now out of reach. What else will quietly disappear before anyone even notices? Number 8. Fresh vegetables. What if eating healthy suddenly felt like a luxury only a few could afford? A bag of lettuce, once the cheapest way to put something fresh and green on the dinner plate, now sits untouched as shoppers silently push their carts past it. In early 2025, the Consumer Price Index showed that fresh vegetable prices in the U.S. surged over 8% in just 6 months. A single carrot that used to cost 30 cents now approaches 60, and lettuce can reach $3 a bunch in many cities. Behind this jump lies a web of quiet crises, late-season frost in California, floods in Texas, record-high fertilizer prices, and massive gaps in farm labor. The result is subtle, but brutal. Many elderly people, told by their doctors to eat more greens, now reach instead for frozen packs or canned substitutes. School lunches are missing the bright green of fresh vegetables. Families standing in front of the produce section are forced to choose between wilted, low-quality imports or nothing at all. The once humble act of steaming broccoli or tossing a salad is now a financial decision. And for those already living on a knife's edge, eating well is no longer a healthy choice. It's a social privilege. In a Midwest town, a woman picks up a bag of kale, stares at the $3.29 sticker, and quietly sets it down, not because it's old or bruised, but because she needs more milk and bread for her family. She walks away, and with her, something else slips away too. The unspoken belief that fresh vegetables, those bright symbols of health, hope, and daily joy, would always be within reach. When even a bunch of greens becomes a question of cost, the issue isn't just about vegetables, it's about the slow erosion of something deeper, the belief that in America, a decent meal is a given. Number 9. Over-the-counter cold and cough medicine. What if you felt a fever coming on and realized there was no medicine left to stop it? No Dayquil, no cough drops, and quite no tablets to help you breathe through the night. Just a dry cough, a rising temperature, and empty shelves. Across America in 2025, this scenario has become more than a fear. It's a daily frustration. After the FDA officially declared phenylephrine ineffective, over-the-counter cold remedies vanished almost overnight. Brands like Dayquil, Theraflu, and Mucinex were pulled from shelves. And in the first quarter of 2024 alone, the American Society of Health System Pharmacists recorded a record 323 drug shortages. Cold medicine, once as common as salt in the cupboard, has turned into something you have to hunt down, store by store. For the elderly living alone, lack of medicine directly threatens their life. For parents, a child's fever in the middle of the night now sparks panic, not just concern. No one's answering the phone. The pharmacy's closed. And even if it were open, there might be nothing left. And for people without health insurance, or those who struggle with English, or who simply can't afford to wait days for an online order. They're forced to fall back on old home remedies, lemon water, steam, hoping for the best, while the fever burns on. The crisis goes deeper than a missing bottle of syrup. Without early treatment, a minor illness can become a major health scare. Community clinics are overwhelmed with people who shouldn't be there if they had found basic medicine in time, but as production stalls and ingredients from overseas remain stuck in limbo, prices climb, access shrinks, and families are left to face sickness with nothing but wishful thinking. Imagine standing at the pharmacy counter while your chest tightens and being told, "Sorry, we're out." That's what happened to one man in Montana. After 3 days of coughing and 3 pharmacies visited, he didn't need an expensive hospital stay, just a simple cold pill. But there was none, and no one knows when it'll be back. When even cold medicine becomes a scavenger hunt, you're not just fighting the flu, you're fighting alone. And in a country that prides itself on modern medicine, that quiet kind of helplessness might be the most dangerous symptom of all. Number 10, poultry. Sounds hard to believe, but trust everyone when they alarm you that soon. Eating chicken is a privilege in America. This isn't a story about luxury cuts or gourmet dinners. It's about the quiet disappearance of the most dependable protein for working families across America. There was a time when people didn't have to think twice about tossing chicken legs into the cart. It was the fallback when beef became too expensive, the choice for kids' lunches, soft enough for the elderly, cheap enough to fill the table without guilt. But now, a simple rotisserie chicken costs more than a gallon of gas. Grocery stores have started packaging smaller portions, and many fast food chains have quietly pulled fried chicken items off the menu due to supply issues. Since late 2024, the H5N1 avian flu has wiped out tens of millions of birds across the Midwest, pushing prices up by 30% or more in states like Texas and Ohio. And unlike past shortages, this one is prolonged by systemic breakdowns, rising feed prices, labor shortages, fuel hikes, and the collapse of small poultry farms. Today, just a few corporations control nearly all chicken distribution. That means fewer choices, less competition, and higher prices, especially for those who can least afford them. The consequences are painful. A grandmother no longer makes chicken soup for the sick. A single father can't afford grilled chicken for his daughter's school lunch. In community kitchens, chicken stew is replaced with canned beans. The symbolic bird that once united generations around the dinner table has become a budgetary burden. In towns where fast food chains once offered $2 chicken sandwiches, now there's just silence. And when the most humble meat becomes unreachable for everyday families, what else quietly slips away? Number 11, affordable clothing and footwear. What if getting dressed for work became a question of dignity, not just routine? Imagine standing in front of your closet and realizing your only winter coat is torn. Your shoes have holes, and the nearest affordable store closed down months ago. Suddenly, you're not just deciding what to wear. You're deciding what part of your life to sacrifice. Not long ago, a sturdy pair of work shoes cost less than $25, and a basic winter coat didn't require a second thought. But today, millions are being forced into impossible choices: shoes or groceries, warmth or insulin. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, prices for clothing and footwear have risen steadily since 2023, with a 5.8% jump in just the first quarter of 2025 alone, as cheap brands collapse under the weight of supply chain breakdowns, import taxes, and rising material costs. Only higher-priced options remain. The fallout is personal. Factory workers wear frayed sneakers to job sites. Children show up at school in shirts too thin for January. Elderly people stay home not because they want to, but because they no longer have warm clothes for the wind outside. Clothing, once a quiet source of pride and self-respect, now magnifies shame and struggle. In a society where appearance still affects how you're treated, lacking the basics isn't just about discomfort, it's about eroded identity. A man in Michigan said he wore the same pair of shoes all winter. When asked why, he replied, "A new pair costs almost as much as my heart meds." That's not a luxury problem, that's a survival problem. When people must wait for a clearance sale to afford socks, when coats become community donated, and when children shiver at the bus stop, we're not just facing inflation, we're watching the slow unraveling of everyday dignity. And if a simple jacket has to come second to a utility bill, what will protect the humanity of those just trying to stay afloat? They used to be simple things: a bottle of water, a bar of soap, a dozen eggs. But now, they've become daily decisions of what to keep, what to let go. And when these basics slip out of reach, it's not just about money. It's about losing control over your own life. When grocery lists become negotiations and familiar items carry unfamiliar price tags, the real crisis isn't at the stock market, it's at your kitchen table. Because what disappears first in hard times isn't luxury, it's normalcy. If you've hesitated at the dairy aisle, counted diapers, or walked away from your morning coffee, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. What's missing from your home that used to be there? What trade-offs are you making now? Sometimes, the smallest things are the ones we miss most until we can't find them anymore.